Unhyphenated Americanism. Now, I like to say that I'm an unhyphenated American. Now, typically when I say that, I get a variety of responses. It just depends on who I'm talking to. Now, some of the really cool responses I get are, all right, finally, and I don't just get that. And I know I don't just get that from white people. I just want you to know that. I get that from a variety of people who are tired of division, who are tired of ethnic hatred based upon things that really don't matter as much as the things that do matter. But then there's another response. There is, oh my God, another Uncle Tom, another Uncle Ruckus, another sellout. What I want to do is I want to address that issue of unhyphenated American. Why do I call myself an unhyphenated American? Hyphenation, means that hyphen, it splits you up, it divides you. So I believe that those things that unite us are more important than those things that divide us. So anything that I can eliminate out of my life that creates unnecessary division, I try to do that. Now, when it comes to ethnicity, I want you to know something. There is no such thing as the black race, the white race, Chinese race. That doesn't exist. Now, I know that that's been the school of thought. That's a narrative. Most of us are indoctrinated that way. And many of us are emotionally tied to that miseducation and that mythology. But the reality of it is, the ideal of, or the ideology of race, go back to the origin, that doing what they call an etymological study. That's a big word, but do an etymological study. Etymology, that means the root origin of a word. Go back and find out, when did this word race appear on the human map? Was it, let's see, were the Greeks writing about race? No, it doesn't exist. Is the word race in the Bible? No, nowhere to be found. Did the Africans, let's see, 2,500 years of dynastic periods in Africa, from the cuneiform to the hieroglyphics, is the word race found in the hieroglyphics? No, it's not found. Is it found in the excavations of caves? It's not found. So where did this word race come from? It came from people who at one time actually thought that there was a group of people who were more superior than another people. And they felt that the color of one's skin meant that there was some sort of innate superiority about them. So they were intellectually superior to you if you were of a different ethnicity, if your skin was of a different tone. And so, unfortunately, during slavery, they came up with this term called race. So we got to do something to justify this. Oh, I know, race. Let's split it up. Let's split everybody up. Race. And while we're at it, let's come up with another thing. We're going to call it negritude, and we're going to say that the reason why black people are black is because they're cursed. So I mean, all this insanity was out there once upon a time, and here we are, 200 years later. And we're still talking as though we're in slavery. Whites and blacks alike. Everybody. We're talking as if we're still in chattel slavery. We're still using terminology that doesn't belong in the 21st century. What in the world is race? There's the human race. If there's going to be a race, there's the human race. In terms of genealogy and DNA, there's the human race. Now, within the human race, you have all these, what they call ethnic cultural groups. Now, that's where I come in. Yeah, I'm ethnic, but it doesn't mean everything to me. It tells me a little bit about my history. It tells me a little bit about the culture of the community that I grew up in, and I value that. I really do. I love to study history. I'm fascinated with world history in general, but African history is obviously, most people tend to be what we call homogeneous. That means we tend to attract to things that are like us. So being black, if you will, I had a natural affinity for studying black history, as they call it. I like to call it American history. I had an affinity for for studying African history, which to me is really a part of world history. And I love to study history. I love reading about King Menes, this African king that united Upper and Lower Egypt, and it was the world's first really great dynasty. 2,500 years of a dynasty in Africa. There was this man called Imhotep who built the first, what they call the step pyramid. Somehow this architect in ancient times was able to build something that we don't know how they did it. We can't build a building today that lasts 100 years without falling apart, and yet they've got something that they built 3,000 years ago, and we don't know how they did it. We have no idea. So these were pretty smart people. So that's pretty fascinating that, you read about people doing cataract surgery in Africa hundreds of years ago. So I read these things, and it lets me know that, wow, they didn't have the technological advances that we have, and they did so many things. So that lets me know that if we would apply ourselves, we could do anything too, but I don't necessarily have to study African history to know that, but it does help to see when people look like you and they come from where you come from. Well, it dispels the myths. It lets you know that, well, it's not true, some of those negative things that we've seen about ourselves, even from our own community. So that's the purpose of my studying history. It's simply to learn the lessons and take those lessons and apply it in a practical way today. We don't need to use history as a reason to separate ourselves and think that one person has more worth than another. Where you come from is not as important as where you're at. You've heard it said in the hood. I'm going to say it like we always say, it ain't where you're from, it's where you're at. So being an unhyphenated American doesn't mean that you're not proud of your heritage, and it doesn't mean that you don't care about it. It doesn't mean that you don't study it. It doesn't mean that you don't practice in some of the cultural norms of your history. It just means that you keep things in proper perspective. I'm 6 generations removed from slavery. My my great grandparents were slaves on a plantation in South Carolina in a place called Snyder's Crossroads. Okay, and down the road from there, there's another town they call Arlington, South Carolina. So our family were slaves there. Okay, and yet 6 generations later, too many people, even in my own family, are still saying, well, I'm African American, as if they're stuck on the plantation, as if we just got off the boat. We're 6 generations away. My great uncle Harry was a war hero in World War II. My grandfather served in World War II. My father served in Vietnam. My uncle served in the war. My family, I'm one of the few males in my family that hadn't served in a war. My oldest brother has been in the Army for 23 years. And I'm saying, how come I can't just be an American? When do we earn the right to just be an American? And what's wrong with saying that I just want to be an American? I don't want to be anything but what I really am, and that's an American. Now, I said to somebody the other day, you know what? They're white Africans. So, and so they have a right to be African American if they come here from Africa more than I do. I mean, I've got friends from Johannesburg, Africa, that are here, and they're white, if you will, and they're more African American than I am. They were born there. I call them African American, and they're looking at many of my black friends who say they're African American. They're saying, "You are? What part of Africa are you from?" And it's ridiculous. So at some point, we've got to stop letting those hustlers out there, those manipulators, those exploiters, the Maxine Waters, the Congressional Black Caucus, all these different people. See, they've got an interest in keeping us divided. They've got something at stake. Okay? They've got something they're trying to achieve on your backs, on our backs. And as long as they can convince us that the color of our skin and our history from 300 years ago or 150 years ago is more important than the fact that those things that unite us are more important than those things that divide us, as long as they can convince us of that, we're never going to get to where we need to be at. We're never going to get over the blight. We're never going to get over the crime, because they know that the only way that's going to happen is if we do it ourselves. So they want to keep us divided. They want to keep us full of anger and rage and hatred, not only for white Americans, but even towards each other.